This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this holiday edition of Nightly Business Report. I'm Sue Herrera. Tyler Matheson is off tonight. It is the unofficial start of summer, and while you're probably thinking about the warmer weather and upcoming vacations, you should also be thinking about your money because a lot can happen over the next few months. So we begin tonight with the stock market. Dominic Chu takes a look at whether Wall Street will heat up along with the temperatures.
There have only been a handful of days so far this year where the S&P 500 has moved up or down by 1% or more. But that quiet move higher towards record levels isn't something that many traders expect to continue this summer.
I think we're going to have Washington continue to dictate our markets while participants stand on the sidelines and watch.
I think we're going to get out of this range we've been in. We're going to go to the upside once the uncertainty is all behind us.
I'd like to be a lot more optimistic, but I'm a little concerned. I think when the president comes back into the country, we're going to go back into a bumpy politicizing again. So I'm going to lean to the sell in May and go away crowd.
Sell in May and go away is something many traders are thinking about this time around. The summertime has been a modestly weaker period for stocks. According to market analytics firm Kensho, over the last 20 years, the S&P has averaged a loss of 1.2% between May 31st and August 31st, and there are more possible catalysts for potential roller coaster moves ahead.
Our expectation for this summer would be more volatility for markets, and there are really several different reasons for that. Monetary policy normalization as well as geopolitical risk. We're likely to see more leaks coming out about what's happening with the investigation. We're likely to see a lot of events unfold outside the U.S., all of which can rock markets.
But there's a reason why stocks have largely shrugged off the political developments at home and abroad. Much of the corporate and economic data still looks relatively okay.
Fundamentally speaking, the economy still looks good, so we're still generally positive on equities. It's just that we need to get past this period of uncertainty before the markets can move forward. It's
still unclear what will eventually lead to that long-awaited pullback for stocks. But markets don't stay this calm for this long very often, which is why some investors are optimistic. Cautiously optimistic, that is. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Dominic Chu at the New York Stock Exchange.
Joe Duran joins us now with his outlook for the markets this summer. He is CEO with United Capital. Welcome, Joe. Always good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
We heard a variety of opinions in Dominic's report about what the expectations were for summer. So why don't you weigh in? What are you looking for?
Well, I think we'll see some fireworks, actually. It's been really remarkably quiet, and what we've had is a series of unusual lows. And what I mean by that is we've had unusually low interest rates, given the strength of the economy, unusually low dollar, given the strength of the economy. What we're also seeing is low levels of confidence that the government that Donald Trump, the president, is going to be able to pass through his agenda. And yet, through all of that, we've seen the market going higher. And why is that? Because earnings have been really good, primarily driven by global companies making money overseas. So what you see is a split market. Small companies not doing that well, big companies doing quite well. I think that's going to continue, but I think you should expect some volatility because as the fortunes of the tax cut and reduction of oversight gets passed through or not passed through, it's going to be cause for market movement, especially because valuations are quite frothy.
What about the Fed? There is the expectation that they will continue to edge up on interest rates. The debate is whether it's going to be in June or whether it's going to be later. How important is the Fed to the market equation this summer?
I think they're not as important this summer because we've got something more important looming, which is what's happening with tax cuts, what's happening with the healthcare plan. And I think the Fed is going to be on hold until that is known. If the tax cuts come through, I think you're going to see an accelerated movement by the Fed. But I think they've proven to be very slow to move. I think what we're seeing is the U.S. GDP growth in the first quarter was very weak. I'm not sure it's going to reach 2 or 3% this quarter. And so they're seeing a lot of improvement in the global economy. But the U.S., the hard data has not been great. So they don't have a lot of impetus to move. And so I think you'll see them moving quite slowly, given the uncertainty we're seeing in Washington right now.
What about the geopolitical risk that one of Dominic's people in his report highlighted. Is that high on your list of potential risks for the market, or does it fall somewhere lower down on the list given the earnings performance that we've seen and other factors?
It's actually remarkably low, because what you see is the risk in Europe has certainly waned. You know, we've seen the elections in Holland and France turned out to be global election that were good for the economy. And what you're seeing is there's a terrorist cost already priced into the market. You saw what happened in England did not reflect in the stock market very much at all. So what you're seeing now is that we've priced in a certain level of uncertainty. I think that's going to be very much about politics in Washington. That could swing the market a lot because of some of the incentives being created. And I always say to people, I'd rather you spend your summer on vacation than worrying about the market, because nothing you do is going to change whatever happens to the stock market.
All right, so given that, where, if you are looking for opportunity, and before you go off on that vacation, you want to allocate some cash, where would you be putting it to work?
Well, the first thing is make sure your overall allocation is appropriate for your risk level, because what we've seen when you see big moves in stock market, as we've seen in certain areas, you can get out of balance. And so what we say to people before summer is make sure you're allocated the right way. The second thing is make sure you have exposure to the international markets. They are growing quicker than the US. They are doing well, and they're doing very well in a global context. So large companies, if you don't want to invest overseas, larger companies have been doing much better and continue to do so with a weakening dollar. So I would just encourage again, make sure your core allocation is right, invest with a view to having global exposure, and then I would not be too aggressive with fixed income. So shorten the maturity, because at some point interest rates will start going back up again.
Joe, thank you so much. Joe Duran with United Capital. Memorial Day weekend is traditionally one of the strongest weekends of the year for auto sales. It's also the start of the busy summer sales season for new and used dealers. This year, the best deals are expected to be with used cars and trucks. Phil LeBeau has more on what's hot on the lot.
Auto dealers love to say there's never a better time to buy. And right now, they might be right.
I think it's going to be a combination. I mean, right now what we know is inventories are high, incentives have been tracking high. I think that right now is a good time to buy, period.
For that, you can thank the glut of used vehicles being auctioned off to dealers who will turn around and sell them to people looking for a model with relatively few miles. That's because many of them are coming off 3- or 4-year leases. In fact, the boom in leasing, which was fueled by lower monthly payments, is one reason annual auto sales climbed to a record high last year. And while demand for new vehicles remains relatively strong, the residual values of used cars and trucks are under pressure, which will hold down the prices for many used vehicles.
From the consumer standpoint, this isn't such a bad thing. It's going to give them a great opportunity to buy these great certified used cars. It just may clip a little bit of where the new car volume we would have expected it to be even a year ago.
The question remains, if you're looking to buy, will the best deals be now or later in the summer?
I expect that there'll be a lot of deals, especially as we head towards the end of the summer, and there's a lot of model year sell downs. There's a lot of 0% financing during that time, and consumers really like that.
Those 0% financing offers are not going away, especially when it comes to mid-size and full-size sedans, which are generally seeing greater deals than trucks and SUVs. Phil LeBeau, Nightly Business Report, Chicago.
If you were on the road this past weekend, you may have noticed it was a lot more congested than usual, even though gas prices are slightly higher than this time last year. Jackie DeAngelis takes a look at whether the pickup in traffic is expected to continue throughout the summer.
As Americans celebrate the unofficial kickoff to summer, they also spring into summer driving season. AAA is projecting the highest Memorial Day travel volume since 2005, even with higher gas prices than the last few years.
39 million Americans traveled over the holiday weekend, and that's about 1 million more travelers than we saw last year, and it's the highest number in more than a decade.
The price for a gallon of gas is roughly 10 cents higher than in 2016, but consumer confidence is also higher.
We definitely are seeing that consumers are much more confident in where the economy is now. We see that personal income is up. We also see that the unemployment rate has dropped significantly. And so there is additional spending money in consumers' pockets. They are more confident this year, and that's resulted in more travel, not just for the summer period, but all through 2017 so far.
It's not just the open road that's calling. Air travel is projected to be up too, more than 5.5%. Almost 3 million vacationers will choose to fly somewhere this weekend. Almost 2 million will choose boat, train, or bus. And this is just the beginning. 4th of July tends to be the peak of the season. Oil prices and gas prices can both climb till then.
Oil prices could easily top $60 a barrel again, which would take gasoline prices right now up another 25 to 30 cents a gallon at the least.
But even the perfect weekend may not be perfect. With every road trip comes the risk of a breakdown. More motorists means more than 330,000 rescues for stranded travelers as well. Hopefully you won't be one. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Jackie DeAngelis.
Still ahead on this Memorial Day, meet the small business owners who are giving back to those who defended our country. But first, some advice from Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg to this year's graduating class.
Build resilient organizations. Speak up when you see injustice. Lend your time and your passion to the causes that matter. My favorite poster at Facebook reads, "Nothing at Facebook is something else's problem." When you see something that's broken, and there is a lot that is broken out there, go fix it. Your motto demands that you do.
It's Memorial Day, a day the nation remembers the people who died while serving in our country's armed forces. Tonight, we will introduce you to some entrepreneurs who are giving back to those who defended our country. We begin with the story of two sisters living in Denver, one a former Army captain who got the bright idea to make fashion handbags and accessories out of durable, one-of-a-kind American military-grade materials.
It's lined with the BDU camo.
Imagine helping to launch your company while on active military duty in Afghanistan. Then again, Emily Nunez-Cavness makes finding time to do the impossible fashionable.
I actually designed our signature tote bag when I was a second lieutenant in my basic officer leadership course.
Emily and her sister Betsy Nunez grew up in a military family. But Emily, an ROTC student, was in her senior year at Vermont's Middlebury College in 2012 when she asked Betsy about making a tote bag using material from an old Army tent.
I could definitely see the wheels turning. I just started asking her questions. What would it look like? Why do you want to make one? Who's going to make it?
Within days, they began shaping a business plan. Their mission? Repurposing military surplus materials to create a sustainable product line, one that can also sustain careers for military vets.
I also heard about challenges around veteran unemployment, and those were really memorable conversations.
Betsy had already been working in e-commerce, but it was their mom who stitched together the first prototype tote bag. Emily had deployed to Afghanistan by July 4th weekend in 2013 when their company, Sword and Plow, began selling 3 products: the tote, a rucksack, and a messenger bag. They've made more than 25,000 shipments since. Their made-in-the-USA products have used more than 30,000 pounds of military surplus.
Anything from sheltercraft tents to parachutes to canvas to aircraft felt and insulation.
This is the ACU Digi camouflage, the uniforms I started out wearing.
Even material used to make American flags.
There was a lot left over, so
it's a great navy color.
5 of their American manufacturers are either veteran-owned or partly staffed by U.S. vets. In Kentucky, Army veteran and entrepreneur Shanna Rottenberg makes their line of hand-hammered jewelry out of .50 caliber shell casings. Sword and Plow supports 65 veteran employees.
For a lot of people, it is a struggle to find where they're supposed to be after they serve.
Laura Keenan came on board after 11 years of active duty, including 15 months in Iraq. The former Army major still serves with the National Guard, but since meeting Emily and Betsy at a White House event in 2015, she's been helping them give civilians a better understanding of the military, a gap many feel has widened over the years.
Someone complimented me on my jewelry. We had a really thoughtful conversation about my service in the Army.
Each product, handbags, pouches, toiletry kits, camouflage travel bags, priced from $19 up to about $360, has its own story.
We just got some parachute material, which I'm really excited about, being a former paratrooper.
An added bonus? Sword and Plow has donated 10% of its profits 4 years running to organizations that support vets.
Every business does have an impact. We think there's a way to do things right and the right way to do things. And we're really excited to be living and working at that intersection.
In the Bible, the term hammer their swords into plowshares refers to the concept of putting military technology to civilian use. And Sword and Plow, the company, just won a $25,000 grand prize in the FedEx Small Business Grant Contest. Emily and Betsy say that money will help them hire another veteran, and they are looking for a logistics expert to help them with inventory management. Military veterans own roughly 2.5 million businesses in the U.S. Vets have started companies like Walmart and FedEx, but one ex-Marine in Nashville is making it his business to give back to vets and their families full-time.
Travis McVeigh considers himself pretty lucky. As a Marine, he was chosen for the Presidential Honor Guard, serving in the late 1980s and early 90s. His two best friends weren't as lucky. Richard Gaston went on to become an Indiana State Trooper, but was killed in the line of duty. And Thomas Rabjohn, a policeman and Army reservist, was called to active duty and died in Afghanistan.
It was just devastating. I go through those emotions when you lose someone, through grief, through anger, feeling guilty for not being there, but finally I was inspired to do something.
McVeigh spent a total of 8 years in the Marines, then 15, working at a Tennessee tire factory. On the side, he dabbled at home, making his own vodka. He dreamed of selling it and donating money to causes that help military veterans. But why vodka?
Vodka you can make today and sell tomorrow. You don't have to age it. It's gender neutral, it's seasonless, and it outsells all the other spirits combined.
McVeigh spent more than a year and about $80,000 tweaking bottle designs, a sales pitch, and his corn-based recipe. He says corn makes a smoother vodka, but getting his Heroes Vodka into stores was no simple feat. So he called a local expert, Robert Lipman, whose family founded the first distributor of Jack Daniels back in the 1930s.
Robert actually answered his phone that afternoon. He said, I've got 100 different vodkas in my warehouse, but I'll give you 20 minutes since you're a veteran.
20 minutes was all it took.
What always drove me is the memory of my two friends. If they can give their life for this country and all the other men and women that serve every day, I can try and start a business and do this.
Lipman was hooked, so he invested in Heroes, betting McVeigh's story would sell. Heroes Vodka went into production on Veterans Day 2011, 11/11/11. In early 2012, about 300 Nashville retailers and restaurants began selling it. Now available in 15 states, Heroes sells for about $15 a bottle.
When I first sat down and spoke to Travis, I said, man, you know, you're climbing a pretty steep hill.
In 2013, Leonard Phillips became the first New York City retailer to carry Heroes.
He was not going to be deterred. He said, I'm going to do this. And I said, well, you've got my support.
15,000 cases and close to $1 million in sales later, Heroes is already donating. Nearly $60,000 so far, mostly to AmVets, a nonprofit chartered by Congress to help American veterans and their families. And while McVeigh's story sells, he's heard from a few detractors too. Some say he's exploiting his military background. Others make him painfully aware of the alcohol issues faced by so many vets.
We're just like anyone else. Some people have a problem with alcohol, some people don't. And I believe in freedom of choice. And also, I tell people, if you have a problem with alcohol, I don't want you to buy my product, period.
McVeigh was named Veterans Business Advocate of the Year by the National Veteran-Owned Business Association, an honor as he answers his new call of duty.
But I tell people, never start a business just to make money. Start a business to make a difference. Yeah, cheers.
Heroes plans to donate 10% of its profits. McVeigh, who also wrote a book about country singers who serve in the military, hopes to have Heroes Vodka for sale in 30 states by the end of the year. He's entering, as we mentioned, a crowded marketplace. There are a lot of vodkas, but his price point of $15 a bottle is pretty moderate. Despite efforts by both the government and the private sector to hire more of our U.S. military veterans, many are still without jobs. Even though the unemployment rate for vets fell about 7% last year, the jobless rate among them is a percentage point above the rate for civilians. Dan Goldenberg, Executive Director of the Call of Duty Endowment, joins us to talk more about this. Welcome, Dan. Nice to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me today.
Why are there issues for so many vets to find a good quality job?
Well, you know, the problem is that veterans are facing some headwinds that we're just not, we haven't seen in the past. In fact, the BLS data that you were referencing, it paints a pretty cheery picture in that the veteran unemployment rate appears to have dropped below 4%, but that just doesn't jive with the reality on the ground. What we're seeing, what we saw last year was a 23% increase in vets seeking help finding jobs. And in the first quarter of this year, we've seen almost an 80% increase in demand. So what's going on here? We think it fundamentally comes back to the fact that the BLS numbers are based on a simple question that's kind of not revealing of the true situation. The question, I'll read it here, is last week, did you do any work for pay or profit? That's it. So obviously that question doesn't talk about the quality of work, and that's really the problem. Our veterans in careers where they're making sufficient funds to support them and their families? And we think the answer is, unfortunately, often and more, no. The problem shifted from do you have a job to you have a job, or you have two jobs, but you just can't pay the rent.
Right. So it's a quality issue as well as a quantity issue. What about retraining? As I understand it, it's easier for officers to find employment after they leave the military than those who are non-commissioned officers. Correct?
Yes. So unemployment for veterans is it's really not an officer problem. It's especially a young junior enlisted problem. So these are very qualified people, incredibly well-trained, in fact, really technical experts with tremendous leadership and managerial experience, really unlike that of their civilian peers. But they have a really hard time translating that often and communicating that to employers, showing them how that career that they've had already could be valuable and applicable in the civilian workplace. So the organizations that we support are really excellent at doing that, helping these junior enlisted folks explain and make their experience relevant. Now, there's always a group of veterans who say, hey, you know, I turned a wrench in the Air Force, but that's not what I want to do in the civilian world. And to get to where they want to be, they have to get a specific skill. And there's great programs out there like the post 9/11 GI Bill and Onward to Opportunity as two examples that really help vets get the education and training they need if they want to take those kind of roles.
You are doing great work, Dan. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Dan Goldenberg with the Call of Duty Endowment. Coming up, the big budget movies the Hollywood studios are going all in on this summer. But first, more big name advice for this year's graduates.
Dream big, and then dream bigger. A more innovative dream, a more inclusive dream. All of you will preserve and enhance the promise of America, the promise that propelled me out of public housing, the promise that will propel you forward regardless of the color of your skin, your religion, your gender, your sexual orientation, or your station in life.
Memorial Day weekend is the unofficial kickoff to summer, and in Hollywood, it kicks off the summer blockbuster season. Julia Borston tells us the flicks that Tinseltown is betting on this year.
The summer movie season is the most important for studios, generating over 40% of their annual revenue.
Raise that sword!
It got off to a weak start at the beginning of May with big budget bomb King Arthur and disappointing performance of the 6th Alien film, just one of many franchise films we'll see this summer, including Universal's 3rd Despicable Me and Disney's Cars 3, which are expected to be hits. But that isn't always the case.
Usually it's the law of diminishing returns, but what studios try to do is infuse these newer installments with new blood, whether it be actors or new points of view, new directors, to try and bring back the originality and the excitement that the first films instilled in the audience.
And some franchises are much older, including the 5th Transformers movie and a 6th Spider-Man movie, which could be risky after a dozen sequels last summer fell short of expectations. And the threats to the movie business are bigger than ever. A growing range of high-quality entertainment options at home, not just on TV, but also streaming on Netflix and Amazon. And movies can fail faster than ever thanks to social media, spreading word of a bad movie like wildfire and keeping consumers home. So which studios have the most at stake? Warner Brothers' Wonder Woman, opening June 2nd, is voted the most anticipated movie of the summer, according to Fandango, and will have ripple effects on other DC Comics films.
The success of Wonder Woman has long-term implications because Batman, Superman, and Suicide Squad did not get good reviews, although they did get good revenue. But if Wonder Woman can get good reviews and big revenue, that bodes well for the future releases that are coming.
Also looking to bolster a family of characters, Universal has its Mummy remake to drive its dark universe of monsters. And Fox is aiming to keep its Planet of the Apes franchise running. But perhaps most important, how new original content performs, such as Warner Brothers' Dunkirk and Sony's Baby Driver. Even with an uncertain summer, MKM's handler says the box office could hit a new record this year. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Julia Borston in Los Angeles.
And thank you for watching this special edition of Nightly Business Report. I'm Sue Herrera. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.